I used to talk a lot about the sleep world and sleep consciousness. When we wake up now, we could wake up to a well-ordered world. It's a world constructed from memories from the mind. Intuitively, we all know this. The world we wake up to is our creation. All of the images and concepts are coordinated and related by our mind into a complex world of images, of inner and outer, and all of that. But if you have a hard time sleeping, you're only getting 4 or 5 or 6 hours a night. It's hard to gain conscious access to the world of sleep. But without that access, we can't really see how we've created that world of being awake and being a person. This morning, when I first awoke, was rather confusing because my mind didn't want to present the same old world to me, but wanted to configure things differently, I guess for the sake of novelty. And so for a while there, I played around in this dream of various alternative realities that I would wake up into. But I couldn't hold on to any of them. The predominant one surfaced as usual. And I present myself to you today as the orange one, because I notice how the lights keep changing on my screen from very orange and yellow to less orange and not yellow. Maybe I still haven't settled on any one identity. So the camera doesn't know how to code this scene and what colors to garb it in. That imaginary world seems so ultra real to us when we're awake and engaged in it. The parameters of our existence fall neatly into place when we wake up in the morning. After the dreams depart, the dreams where things keep changing and changing and changing, they stabilize into what we call present existence. But as Robert and many others carefully and clearly point out, the reality we live in is totally a creation of mind. The mind creates a reality that we can function in because we know all the players and all the trappings and all the scenes. We know what gravity is, and we know what the floor is, the ceiling, the walls, entrances, exits, windows, doors. It all makes sense to us, and we can function perfectly in this world we create each morning when we wake up. We wake up from being no being into being a being in a photograph I have created for myself. The world I create, that I wake up into, is not real. And by that, I mean, if we were to go back into sleep, that world would disappear. And would fade back into the background as one of many potential worlds we could awaken to. And in dream, we awaken to altogether different worlds where there are scenes, characters, matrix of meaning for that particular world. But when we wake up, we become scientists of this world. We keep examining this world in the same way, day after day after day, which makes it very permanent. But if we were taken out of this world that we know so well, day after day, week after week, month after month, and put into the jungles of Africa or of South America, where we didn't have a clue, we might not survive a week. Frank has joined me in an orange invasion. We'd be utterly lost in the jungle. What we may do is to just stop for a while and peruse all of our images of what a jungle is about. all the movies we've seen, get some idea how to survive in this new strange world that's so strange and different from my own, that's filled with danger from poisonous insects and snakes and mammals and birds. So dangerous we don't even dare feel it because we'd become terror-stricken, unable to move. So that's why each morning we snap into a world of the known. The world Rekha creates every morning when she wakes up. And Vasily too. And Chris and Eddie and Bata. The world we create seems to be the one that many of us are trying to leave and find a more real world. But it's enough to know that whatever world we see or we live in is a creation of mind. And our creation may not fit the actual reality we live in. This is called insanity. For example, creating a world of flowers and good cheer when waking up in the middle of a jungle. Pretending we're Bambi when we're surrounded by lions. Our creation does not fit the circumstances. Now we create this being that we wake up to every day. And it's a fairly stable life. But there's not a lot of interesting stuff happening in it. Unless we live in a very active life of traveling, reading, participating. But most of us live in a rather dull life in comparison. There's very few of us that have new peak experiences each week. Instead, we live in a static world of our concepts. It's really only being touched by the dream world and deeply investigating the dream world that we can see how this shell of a reality that we wake up into each day is created by our mind. And when we can really perceive that world we live in is like a movie we've projected onto a three-dimensional external matrix, four-dimensional if you add time. That we see how fragile everything is in our understanding. Our reality seems safe and real only because we create one of safety. With insurance, bank accounts, backup systems. And yet all of that can be destroyed in a few minutes by a fire, an earthquake, flood. An invasion from Belarus or Russia. And our whole system, our whole life can be overturned in a day, an hour. And that new world has new rules. We have to learn to live by those rules in order to survive in that world. So while we wish that the world we lived in was more rich, more comfortable, more predictable, in fact, it's quite illusory. And spiritual seekers know that. So where do we find the unchanging? Where do we find the source of awareness? Bernadette's cat's tail disappeared. It was so prominent there for a minute. But she crushed that tail, so it no longer exists. Notice how Mark always tries to appear to be amused by everything going on here. Vesselina always seems on the verge of sleep or to be totally asleep. The world is our creation. The world we wake up into every day has its rules, its parameters, its boundaries, and its safety. We know all the rules to stay safe in this world. And yet many of us search not for safety, but for the real, only never to be able to find it. Because everything we live in seems to be a creation of our minds. And the world that an Aborigine who's never seen civilization lives in, it's very different from our world. Can you imagine waking up in the plains of Australia, waking up to a tribe whose language you don't understand? And even if you did, the concepts would not make any sense to you. You would feel totally shaken and scared for your life because you don't know the rules of this world you've awakened into. That's why so many of us watch movies. We want to find a world that tells a story that awakens or challenges us to see things differently. But just take this with you as truth. The world that you're living in has been carefully constructed, deconstructed, and reconstructed by you over dozens of years and tends to be quite stable, too stable. And we strive to break out of that monotony by finding deeper truths or at least different truths. We can go inside, turn our attention around on our own consciousness, and reach a point of concentration where there's nothing that exists at all, or that which exists is just a oneness, not differentiatable into two-ness or three-ness or four-ness. And maybe we flirt with change in that way, of trying to see the world differently, more novelly. Without the great existential burden placed on us by the reality we create each day. I remember when my father died. It shook me terribly because one constant object in my universe just disappeared. And every morning I'd wake up and started to wake up into my traditional world, when even before I opened my eyes, I remembered my father was dead. And the world I was waking up into was quite different from the world of just a week before. That realization smashed me. And I began reading over and over again the Tibetan Book of the Dead and reading about the states. That the dead pass through on the way to rebirth. And I remember how I used to talk to my dead father, either silently or aloud when I was by myself, explaining the Bardo states to him, to guide him through them, when I myself was trying to guide myself through a new world without my father. In many ways, this new world was better than the old world, because the world with my father in tended to be rather cruel, abrupt, and critical. But the new world was frightening, because the constancy of his authoritarian presence was not there. The reassuring constancy of his authority. I hated his authority and his presence. But when it was gone, I feared for my existence in this new world where he was absent. Where did I fit in? How did I fit in? So this is the struggle that we all undergo, especially those with spiritual bent, who are looking for something beyond the life that we know already. Looking for permanence, looking for life everlasting, looking for the source of the world, which is within us. Or else we explore the world outside as being something different and alien that we have to master in order to survive. But if the disruption is too much to handle, we are confronted with insanity and possible death. What if we cannot cope with this new world without the authoritarian father or the authoritarian government or the authoritarian wife or husband, and instead had to live alone inside of a boring universe of changelessness? A lot of spiritual people become wanderers in a way. They take a look at a picture of spiritual America, which I was dreaming about before I woke up today. There's the spirituality of A and B and C and D and all the other teachers out there And each one we associate with a certain kind of truth, which if we examined objectively, we would find out are amazingly different from each other. How different the world of Swami Chaitananda is from that of Robert Adams. How different is the world of Muktananda? Different from that of Robert or Nisargadatta. How different is the world of Advaita, the world of the Christian mystic who immerses themselves in Christ consciousness. In a sense, I've been living in Christ consciousness for over a decade. I also feel its emptiness and can transcend it and dwell just in the emptiness and nothingness of non-existence, or existence only of the source and not the derivative, not the existential reality. When we're much practiced in spirituality, we have the ability to explore alternatives without traveling very far, because we recognize that traveling only changes the environment, but we take with us to that environment the same concepts and the same world construct that we had when we left. And in order to get very, very far beyond the everyday world we live in, really requires access to the world beyond the existential world, that of sleep, that of dream, that of nothingness, that of emptiness. In nothingness, there is no creation. We just exist without a world around us. It's a world of oneness. And sometimes we can live in that oneness a long time, like Ramana did for many years, living in a cave or in the basement of a temple, just being himself as beingness. It's not like the state of an ordinary person at all. An ordinary person is filled with thoughts about their world. Their world needs to be cleaned, needs to be made safe, needs to be explored. But some say, no, it has to be transcended. And how can it be a transcended? One way is to just not move. To become like Bata, always one position, always in a different world, a world of non-existence, a world of imagination only, without the confines created by the identity we accept when we wake up in the morning. It's impossible to refuse that identity. So we meditate. And we meditate because we see in meditation all the forms disappear. There's just one world with various tones and colors and sounds. But they're not differentiable into separateness, into I and thou, you and you and you. It's just oneness. And all the images sort of flow together at a time. And that's how our mind is. Our mind can create 10,000 different realities, but it tends not to go outside of the boundaries created by society too much. And when they do, they have to leave off the society and form a society of their own and become isolated monasteries where silence is practiced. Their whole day is lived by bells and gongs. And there's no room for conceptualization because you keep listening for sounds that signal what to do next. Reality is not real. We carry it around with us in terms of ideas and concepts. And it's so very, very hard to get rid of those concepts and those ideas and to live free from them. You can only live free from those ideas when you're not in movement in the world that we think we live in. If we're active in that world in terms of movement, we need to have a map, and that map is the one we habitually have for that environment. It's possible to go beyond only when there's no movement of the body in that imaginary world. When we stop in meditation and just become aware of ourselves. Become aware of ourselves as beingness. And being aware of the joy that such awareness brings. Now, There's something about perspective that has to be learned here. I have several people that don't come to our satsangs, but who write to me with questions. And they say something to the effect like, I hear what you say, and I've done what you say. I laid down all concepts that I could find. I've thrown away all concepts that I could find and live without concepts, without knowledge, without understanding. But all that I find after a brief bout of happiness is the same misery, loneliness, and desolation that I knew before I threw away all my concepts. So I did what you said, and I haven't been able to shake off that deadly loneliness and unhappiness that I had before. So I write back to them, and there's many of them like this. Spirituality is not a once and for all deal. You can't take a look at yourself as you are right this minute, and the 4 or 5 concepts that come to mind and throw them away and say we've escaped or divorced ourselves from all concepts, because certainly we have not. We can escape from a few concepts at a time. But the entire mental process of formulating what's real and true versus what's unreal and true is an ongoing process. And to get rid of all of that we know is impossible without radically changing our external existence. And those in spirituality do that. They go to monasteries, or if they're householders, they go to sessions at some temple or some center for a few days and try to shake off through changing the environment that you operate in a monastery so radically that the old world falls away. And you are in a new world of woodclackers, gongs, eating, sitting, meditating. And that's all. Examining existence from a different reality set than we're used to in everyday life. And it's really important to shake up our external reality in order not to get trapped in the same one that we're trapped in every day. Each one here is trapped in their own reality. Many of us don't like being trapped, so we seek freedom of being untrapped. But it's not easy to find true freedom until we can see the mind as how it creates the realities around us. And that requires access to the sleep world. And we watch how, in the process of waking up during the daytime, we create that reality that we live in. We watch ourselves wake up from nothingness to being present as an observer within an observed world that we create purely by our habit. And there are spiritual teachers among us who try to shake up that world, either by making you go to a center or a monastery for a week, a month, a year, or by playing with you like gurus tend to play with their students in order to cause a lot of stress in the world that they live in. So much so they're able to divorce themselves from that world by losing certain identifications they have. So after a while, you live in the world, but not of it. The world you live in, you see as a shell. It's not real. It's created by our minds. And it's hard to change. It's hard to change without making radical change to an environment. One way to make a radical change is to slow down and not move around in our world anymore. To just sit and be aware. And when we can just sit and be aware without much input from the external world, we can feel such joy. Because we find our happiness in our beingness, not in our doingness. We shift 180 degrees. Most people find reward in accomplishing something. Becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, inventing something, having a family and nurturing it, being successful and making lots of money, creating a new society. Whatever your bent is towards, finding the beautiful love relationship that just flowers and flowers and flowers without souring. Or finding a place where we can live in relative quiet, with no worry about income. And then we don't have to worry about movement anymore. We can stop moving altogether and just rest in our own beingness, not our doingness. Just recently, I read how one of my former students talked about how happy she is because she's finally living in a world where she feels she's creatively inventing her life from moment to moment in terms of her work, raising a family, and feeling like she's creating a better world around her just by her attitude and the things she does in purity. But what she's really doing is she's getting high on herself and her ability to do, to create. She's worshiping her power to create. In her everyday world, a life that she enjoys and that she feels empowered by. It's a process of self-actualization, not self-realization. She's happy because she's effective in this world and able to make some changes in her life and those around her that seem positive. But she's rushing around so much in her own small world of creativity that she doesn't get to feel the total happiness of just being alive. Lost in one's own self. There's nowhere to go, Eric. Nothing to see, Mark. Nothing to know, Bernadette. Nothing to find, Dahlia. Nothing to say, Jay. Just rest in yourself. Feeling that drum beat of beingness within your own existence, the heart of your own existence. When you close your eyes and you're no longer able to see the body, but you can feel the life within. But that life within does not seem to be confined to the body, but is well around you, enveloping you. That life force. That life force is not bound by your body when your eyes are closed. So why treat it as bound when your eyes are open? Instead, feel the life force within. It's bubbling up within, from below, from your gut, into your heart. Feel the bubbling of the life force in you. And when you can feel it, your own life, then you don't need some other one. You don't need to leave. You don't need to change the background. You don't need to give up the city and become a farmer, or give up your job and go to a monastery, because you already know the self. The self you find when you no longer do anything. You're no longer tangled in your mind with things to do or places to go. Instead, you just sit quietly by yourself and feel yourself. You feel the life force within, and you know it's the same life force within everybody else. And in that sense, we are all one. So the happiness of Chris is my happiness. The happiness of Eric is my happiness. The travels of Eddie are my travels. The world of Jay is my world. And my world is that of Jay. What would your life be like if you were just happy because you were alive? Your happiness arose out of your beingness, not your doingness. You just be quiet and you find your happiness within by immersion in that bubbling of the life force inside of us. It's not necessary to create a different world. It's not necessary to leave this world and travel the world looking for a spiritual teacher or a monastery or a cave to study oneself. You can study oneself in the midst of a fireworks display on the 4th of July. While sitting in a theater in Washington, D.C. You can just immerse yourself in yourself without any concentration on the external world at all. You just feel your own beingness, your own aliveness, the currents of energy maybe, or just the beingness within, or just the feeling of the life force and the joy of feeling the life force. It's not necessary to move, not necessary to leave your home or the city of your home to find a different reality where there's more happiness. Because happiness is to be found within your own self by feeling your own self and the intensity of the life force within you, and recognizing that life force is the same in all of us. And that's our identity, is with the life force. And each and every one of us shares in that identity. Nothing to do, everything about being. Nowhere to go, you're right home already. All you got to do, though, is close your eyes and feel within for the life force within, and examine that, what you see within, and how would you describe it with your eyes closed? And see how impossible it is to describe it with the usual words with your eyes closed, using eyeless concepts. And instead, all you can say is, it's all about being, not about becoming. It's about recognizing what we are and who we are, not about what we can become or who we can become. I watch those poor athletes competing at the Olympics, doing their figure skating or bobsledding or skiing or ski jumping. And I feel for them that they get so much elation out of jumping 6 inches more than the next competitor. How happy they seem, beating others and doing better at a defined skill like skating, with all of its rules. It's really kind of fake. And to see all the people that are enticed in watching figure skating and all the nuances of the scoring of skating, and how they are obsessed about winning, and how they cry after they fail, one after another of the skaters, after they fall and their performance is over, they skate away crying that they failed. But fuck, if they only knew how to feel the life force within, they would have that sense of elation all the time, bubbling up within them all the time, bubbling up from the pelvis and the guts into the heart, where it trickles and then roars into the heart as the life force within us, with light and energy and happiness. And how do you tell somebody to find the happiness in yourself? By feeling for the life force in yourself, feeling for the spark of life in you. And if you've never looked for it, it's very hard to find, because you don't know where to look or how to feel for it. You don't know anything about it, how to do it, how to search for yourself. Like I used to say, or I used to tell you all the time, Muktananda perplexed me because he said, love the self, worship the self, honor the self, but he never said what the self was. He took that for granted that you knew. But I certainly didn't know what the self was. That self is the life force that lives through me, and which I take as my own, even though the life force in you is the same. You're just in a different body, but that doesn't really mean anything. The one life force is the same in all of us, whether you call it God, Christ, Guru, whatever. We're all one life. The binding force between all of us is that we're alive. And that can mean happiness if you just stop doing and instead enjoy being. And when you do it enough, you become totally useless, like Ramana, sitting in the temple basement, glued to the floor, because he didn't move for years. And the excrement and the bugs and the blood and the pus all piled up. People had to force feed him. But they couldn't break through the bliss to get his attention, because his attention was only on his own self. He said once he found the self within, he could not take his attention away from it. And it'll be that way with you too, once you find the life force within you. And you recognize that as your true identity, at least as a human being. You are a sentient being. You are alive, aware, and have your beingness, which is God-given right. And feeling that beingness within is happiness. Happiness of the deepest sort. Not the happiness of accomplishment by doing the quintuple Lutz, but happiness of just being able to breathe and be able to feel yourself, the life force within you. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, except to relax and feel your own self within you and what that's like. Feel into your heart. You feel the life force there. Feel into your gut. You feel the life force there. Feel into your pelvis. You feel the life force there. Feel into your chest. You feel the life force there. Feel into your fingers and feel the energies there. Feel the energies between your fingertips in a cupped hand. Now drop back and feel the energies inside your body. And if you go deeper than the energies, you can find the life force that begets those energies. But it's good to play with the energies, because knowledge of the energies, explicit knowledge of the energies flowing within you, can lead you to the source, the life force, from which all of those movements of energy that you feel propagate. They all come out of that vast well of the life force and become transported into perceived energies within ourselves. But deeper than those energies is the life force. And that life force is the same in all of us. And all of us are the same in that same sense of being alive and being sentient and being in the life force. I'm in the life force now. I'm not behind a plow. I'll never get rich by digging a ditch. I'm in the life force now. Nowhere to go, no ditches to dig, just plants to water and cats to be fed and worshiped. I miss my collie so much. The kinds of communications we had with each other in silence, just staring in each other's eyes, holding her, having her paws outstretched to touch me. And when she died, I didn't have that camaraderie anymore. I only had my own self. And having that own self was accompanied by a kind of sadness that Kali was not there to be there with me in her own self. So there's really nowhere to go. You're already there. It's just that active minds take themselves away from where they are to where they could be, or they want to be, or they think they should be, into a world of imagination, or into a world of entertainment, or into a world of accomplishment. What a terrible thing when the world of doing becomes a world of accomplishment and becomes a world of that we worship and reward ourselves with by accomplishing things. What if we didn't have to accomplish anything? What if our happiness didn't depend on doing, but on just recognizing our own life force within us? Bata, are you capable of taking the lead? Can you take over? Okay. I love you all. Just dwell in yourself. Just spend the next half hour dwelling in yourself and worshiping yourself, feeling the life force within.